Well, how often do we see politicians looking worse for wear in how they try to smother a drama as opposed to the drama they created in the first place? It's happened in New South Wales after the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, started losing her voice last week. Just after 3 p.m. last Tuesday, the Premier decided to take a COVID test. But instead of going home to isolate, two separate sources inside Parliament House told The Australian that during the 90 minutes she had to wait for the result, her meeting schedule remained unaltered. Obviously, some inside Macquarie Street are very keen on seeing Gladys Berejiklian stumble at the moment. But it is a fair point. The Premier didn't go home to isolate, as her and her ministers have been drumming into us for months and months. However, it is not a huge gotcha, unless, you know, you're stuck in a hotel somewhere for 2 weeks, unable to do much at all, or at home in isolation, which can be almost as bad. But again, talk about looking very ordinary, trying to spin it to the positive. First, there was Jobs Minister Stuart Ayres, who made a galah of himself on the ABC last night.
I don't think she had any COVID symptoms. She'd lost her voice. She was pretty upfront about that, but didn't exhibit any other symptoms and took a precautionary COVID test. Results came back in a couple of hours.
But the instructions from your own Department of Health are clear, saying that you must self-isolate if you've been tested and are awaiting results. Why does that not apply to the Premier?
I think she's evaluated what's important for her. I think that she's not exhibited any symptoms and she's done the right thing.
No, Stuart, it doesn't even pass the kindergarten test. Why did you even bother? And then early today, the Premier had Carl on her tail.
I did the test and not only did I not have COVID, but I didn't have any virus, which is what I suspected because I didn't have any symptoms, I didn't feel unwell, I didn't feel anything except for talking too much, which is part of my profession, unfortunately, and it's been a long year. Yeah,
it has been a long year, but you did break your own rules. You did break New South Wales health rules.
Oh, well, ordinarily, if I was an ordinary citizen, I wouldn't have had any symptoms, so I wouldn't have taken the test, but I went over and above.
But Premier, you broke the rules.
Oh, look, that's all down to interpretation. I took a test which I didn't really need to, but I wanted to.
No, Gladys, wouldn't you just fess up? Yeah, I did break the rules. I am leader of the state. I've made a decision. In hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done it, or something else. Now, the ABC had another go, which did reach its target.
So you're going to change the New South Wales guidelines now? Because they say that if you have a test, you've got to self-isolate.
Sure, and also you have to have a test when health asks you to, and health will ask you to have a test.
But the question is, are you going to change the guidelines?
Yeah. Absolutely not. Why would I change the guidelines?
Well, because you're not following them.
Do myself. Well, no, I'm sorry, but I would never do that. I would never, ever do that. My mission has been from day one, putting the people of this state first.
You do accept that you didn't follow your own guidelines?
Yeah, I accept that in hindsight I should have kept my door shut for the 90 minutes or the 2 hours until I was waiting for the result. I do accept that, and in hindsight I should have done that.
Yes, she said it. Not a biggie. This is not a biggie. The Premier didn't really have a typical COVID-19 symptom for a start. But those presenters are correct. And today, Federal Health Minister Greg Hunt got a bit confused as well. He said the Premier was asymptomatic, and that means she didn't need to self-isolate.
Where somebody has symptoms, then they should isolate. Where they're doing asymptomatic testing, and it is quite common that we do asymptomatic testing around the country. We do it with trucking, we do it with aged care, we do it with transport, logistics, and also in test programs and in other circumstances with critical workers, and I imagine the Premier would be an absolutely critical worker. Then asymptomatic testing doesn't require, under the reference guide that New South Wales has on its own website, asymptomatic testing doesn't require isolation.
A critical worker. Maybe that was the way out of it from the get-go. But we asked New South Wales Health if an exception like that existed for people who don't have symptoms. They gave us a flat no, saying after testing, people should self-isolate until a negative result is received. Look, it's a moot point now. It's old news. It will be tomorrow. At the very least, the Premier should have shut herself away in her office, as she admitted to the ABC. But What is it with politicians who still think they can fool us all with spin and a mountain of meaningless words? And what is it with their minders who give reporters a hard time for even pointing to the obvious? According to the Australian's Johnny Bashar, the Premier's office threatened to shame the paper for publishing it.
Very strong efforts were made to intimidate us into not publishing the story and to threaten us in some way, not legally, but the word grief was used, and there was a very strong sense that we would be shamed and embarrassed by the Premier's office were we to persist with publication.
We all know that the Premier has been wounded by the evidence presented at ICAC and her relationship with former MP Daryl Maguire. And it's the job of the Premier's team, we understand, to protect their leader, to maintain her reputation. But seriously, over something in the very lower category of damaging, there seemed to be way too much spin, way too much shepherding, both in front of and behind the cameras. And look what happens today. The smother becomes more embarrassing than the crime. Just fess up, show some honesty, tell the attack dogs to lay off, and the outcome usually never ends up anywhere near as bad.